So here we are. You're just now starting to dive into the cryptocurrency journey, and everything sounds intimidating and crazy, and there's so much to it. But before we get too deep into a lot of this stuff, where we're going to make things much more simplistic and easier to understand and wrap your head around, the one key thing that I want to start addressing is security. And that's one of the reasons why I'm putting this up towards the top, because I think that there are certain practices that you're going to need to start getting used to as you continue to move forward in your cryptocurrency journey. Believe me when I tell you, the easier it is for you to access anything, the easier it is for a hacker or an intruder to do the same. And so you're going to have to adopt, especially if you have large sums of crypto that you're planning on investing in or holding or accumulating, whatever, you're going to really need to adopt these. And some of them are going to suck. I'm telling you now, some of them aren't going to be exactly fun. The things that I have had to do to keep myself secure after 2 hacks, I go crazy, and I tell you right now, I'm sure there are plenty of things in the world that can give you a really terrible sunken feeling of just complete invasion. But for me personally, one of the most terrible feelings was when I realized my computer was hacked and a Russian hacker had access to my account or my computer all night and held my YouTube channel hostage, was on my Twitter account tweeting at me. I'm telling you right now, it was insane. Luckily for me, because of some of the things that I've done in this, they didn't get anything of value, and they did shut down my YouTube account. But there are so many things that I've adopted since then that I'm sharing with you here. I am telling you right now, as the first video of this segment, the first video of this list of videos, do not ignore these. Do not ignore these. I don't care if they're time consuming. I don't care if they make your investments and the things that you do a real pain in the butt. Do not ignore these. Okay. Hopefully I'm making myself abundantly clear. The very first thing that we're going to talk about right now are your passwords. Quite simply, you don't save them in your browser. And that is something that, well, let me put it to you this way. You don't want to save passwords for anything of value or anything that would cause you harm should it get out. And that's one of the key things. You don't want to save useful or valuable passwords in your browser, because there are a lot of reasons for this. Number one, let's say you're clicking around in your email, somebody sends you some email and it says, hey, check this out, I thought you might like this. You click it, boom, you might have just opened up a port giving somebody access to Sub7, your account. You don't even need to know what that means, other than they now have access to your entire computer. You never know when clicking something is going to give somebody access. And in addition to passwords and not saving them in your browser, there are a few other things that I want you to consider. I'm gonna supplement this list. 8 characters minimum. Okay, I don't think I've ever used any less than 12. And the reason for this is the higher the number of characters you use in a password, with the more variety in the password units, the more difficult it is to brute hack something. Okay. There are a lot of software packages out there for brute forcing passwords. If somebody wants an account access of yours enough, they can sometimes get it. It depends on what the account is, where it is, what kind of server it's on, what the website is, what the website security is, so forth and so on. But more often than not, you're going to find yourself, if you have a website that you own or whatever, there are a lot of methods from which people are able to brute force passwords. The number of characters in your password magnify the number of attempts into the millions when you start getting into a 12-unit password or more. So typically, and I always use letters, numbers, different symbols, and they're nonsensical. Okay, so and oftentimes, even if you're using a password and an opportunity comes up where you're told, hey, we can create a random password for you, it looks like a lot of gobbledygook. Often, that's probably a pretty good one. But you want to make sure that it has no less than 8 characters. Keep away from dictionary words. That's a really big one, because a lot of brute force attempts will ultimately use words that are known. Okay, easy words. If you've ever seen the movie Hackers I think it was the 80s, it was one of my favorite movies. God, admin, stuff like that. The different passwords that people use are silly. The names of your children, your maiden name, just different things that are tied to you personally. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Now, you're going to ask yourself, oh, Crow, so what if I do all this? I have a 15-string password and it's a bunch of numbers and special. If I can't save it on my browser, what do? You get a ledger book, and preferably a hardbound, even a lockable ledger book. And not only that, but I would suggest making 2 copies of it. Keeping one put away, whether it's in a safe deposit box or something like that, as a backup should something happen. But ultimately, you want to be writing your passwords down in a book. Yes, you want to be inputting those passwords every time you log into a financial account. You just don't want them saved in your browser. Well, why else don't you? Well, because another tip here is, let's say you've got 5 websites, okay, that you access frequently. You're using the same password in every one of these websites, okay? Maybe one of them saved in your browser because it's really important, but the others aren't. Well, you still messed up, because not only should you be using a completely different password for every major account you utilize, you're not saving them in your browser, but you're writing them in your book. Why? Well, because if you use the same password, let's say I created a big long password for my financial account, but then I used that same password on some silly, could be anything, any kind of other website. Maybe you use it on a website where you buy printing or t-shirts or whatever. If that website gets hacked, and the database of user data, which we see all the time, gets hacked, now they know your username is attached to this password on this website. What would you as a hacker likely try next? Other websites. You can do email searches. You can go to other websites. Depending on the kind of data that is stored on the database that they hacked, it could say, well, you like to use this website, and these are your other interests. And then they can start looking at other websites, some of the most common websites, like maybe your Facebook account. All they have to do is plug in an email address and in that password and see if it accesses some sort of social media account, maybe your Twitter. So that's why you never use the same password more than once. Okay, so these are some pretty key things. No family names, which, a lot of people like to use their kids' names and things like that. You don't want to do that. Use special characters in words. Like, this is an example of what they use Charlie. So they're trying to spell Charlie. They use, like a numeric code, a number 4 instead of an A, exclamation mark instead of an L, a number 3 instead of an E. Now, here's the thing, though. Hacker, this is all leet speak. This is pretty much, hackers created this, okay, as a fun way of talking to each other on like IRC chats and things. You know what I mean? This is all leet speak. This is hacker leet speak. So they're obviously very well aware of these tactics and things, but it could be an A or a 4. And you're basically increasing the number of variables that would be necessary to solve in ultimately a string that is unguessable. So, and the longer a hacker has to spend time trying to brute force your password, the sooner it's likely they're going to give up. They're not going to, especially if it's just some random thing. They don't know if you've got anything. They're just curious. Using passphrases, not passwords. So oftentimes people will use like a string of like I ate brown cheese, number, symbol, whatever, right? And that can sometimes be just as difficult to crack as something completely random, but ultimately it's more about the number of strings that you're using, a number of units, a number of letters and symbols and things. Using numbers to finish words, which we've already gone over, condensing favorite sayings, removing the vowels and adding numbers. So basically, in a nutshell, it's all about just creating as complex and unguessable password for anyone that might know you, anyone that might see you, have any idea what your interests might be, so forth and so on. You're not saving them in your browsers. You're writing them down in a ledger book. You're creating a new password for every single website or account you have. Period. End of story. On to the next lesson.